Welcome to The Big Story. I'm Gretchen Ho.
I'm Pauline Verzosa.
And I'm Sean Yao.
Tonight's big stories. The PNP closes rank as a police doctor files criminal charges against Vice President Sara Duterte and her staff over their behavior during a hospital transfer.
Yet another case. A disbarred lawyer has filed a disbarment complaint against VP Sara. Larry Gadon calls out Duterte's profanity, which is the same reason he lost his own license.
And a new Padea Matrix reveals personality supposedly behind a billion-peso drug haul in Pampanga last year. One familiar name stood out for his connection to former President Rodrigo Duterte.
We begin with Vice President Duterte and some of her staff at the OVP now facing criminal charges. They are being sued by a police doctor.
Now that's over their behavior during a hospital transfer that went out of control at one point and which involved Sara's chief of staff.
But Vice President Duterte is unbothered by the complaint, saying it does not hold water at all. Mary Monreyes has tonight's big story.
This is part of the video presented by the Philippine National Police in a media conference. It showed Vice President Sara Duterte and her head security, Colonel Raymond Lachica, pushing and shooing away a PNP medical staff. That doctor was tasked by the House of Representatives to supervise the transport of the OVP Chief of Staff Zulaika Lopez to the Veterans Memorial Medical Center in Quezon City last Saturday. 4 days after the incident, that same doctor filed a complaint against Duterte. Police Dr. Lieutenant Colonel Van Jason Villamor was accompanied by eyewitnesses to the QC Hall of Justice on Wednesday. Villamor is suing the Vice President, Colonel Lachica, and 2 other OVP personnel for direct assault, disobedience to authority, and grave coercion. Villamor was so taken aback by the demeanor of Sara and her staff.
Okay naman po ako. Hindi po namin inaasahan na magiging ganon ang kahihinatnan in the performance of our duties, and then naging ganon pa.
For the Quezon City Police District, the police doctor's complaint only proves one thing.
Nobody is above the law. Kung meron paglabag, ay ating kasambahan ng kaso.
In a media conference in Zamboanga, Duterte believes the PNP's complaint does not hold water. She plans on filing counter-charges. For its part, the PNP hopes for a favorable ruling for one of its own, even as he is going against the second highest official of the land.
The Vice President is an impeachable officer. She is not immune from suit. No, based on several jurisprudence, there are no express provision from the Constitution, and from the statutes.
Mobile journalist Mary Monreyes, we are One News.
Now, this case and the PNP's own investigation has prompted the AFP to revamp the Vice President's security detail. This was confirmed today by AFP Chief of Staff Romeo Browner. Brian Castillo has that story.
The Vice Presidential Security and Protection Group is set for an overhaul. AFP Chief of Staff Romeo Browner confirmed that many members of the security group will be replaced to ensure the effectiveness of the Vice President's security detail. Browner said they received a subpoena from the PNP calling members of the VP-SPG to be investigated for the incident at the Veterans Memorial Medical Center over the weekend. Among them is VP-SPG Commander Colonel Raymond Lachica. The VP-SPG currently has around 350 members.
If these investigations will continue, they will not be able to conduct the security properly and effectively. Kaya nga po, ang gagawin natin is that we will be replacing them with fresh personnel from the PNP and from the AFP.
Browner also denied reports that he will take over the Vice President's security group.
Di po totoo yun na I will take over the VP-SPG. It is still under the Presidential Security Command. Di ko po kayang gawin yon dahil marami po tayong iniisip na iba pang mga security issues ng ating bansa.
The PNP, for its part, has deployed 25 police personnel to the VP-SPG in anticipation of the possible recall of military personnel from the unit. PNP spokesperson Police Brigadier General Jean Fajardo said the AFP requested for the police personnel for Duterte's security.
On the part of the PNP po, we don't have any information with respect po sa alleged threat against the Vice President. But nonetheless, the PNP is open to collaboration and cooperation.
This is not the first time the Vice President's security detail underwent changes. Just last July, 75 police personnel assigned to the VP-SPG were recalled due to police manpower issues. The Office of the Vice President has yet to comment on this development. But yesterday, Vice President Duterte criticized the Presidential Security Command for being eerily quiet on the documented threats to her family, and OVP personnel. Both the PNP and the AFP reiterated that they remain apolitical and steadfast in their sworn duty to remain loyal to the Constitution and duly constituted authorities. For News 5, Brian Castillo, we are One News.
A once staunch ally turns against the Dutertes. Himself a disbarred lawyer, anti-poverty czar Larry Gadon has filed a disbarment case against the vice president. Camila Samonte tells us why.
Ninyong lahat, Martin Romualdez, Lisa Marcos, Bongbong Marcos.
The language of VP Sara is just one of the reasons why Presidential Advisor for Poverty Alleviation Larry Gadon wants to strip off the right to practice law. For Gadon, Sara's insults and tirades should not be condoned, especially when she went on to threaten the lives of President Bongbong Marcos Jr., his wife Liza, and his cousin House Speaker Martin Romualdez. Many find it ironic, though, that Gadon is taking offense at profanity. In June last year, he was unanimously disbarred by the Supreme Court for his sexist remarks against journalist Raisa Robles, caught on video. The High Tribunal called Gadon's behavior indisputably scandalous and harmful to the reputation of the legal profession. But for the expelled lawyer, Duterte's case is different.
Si VP Sara, pinagmumura niya, hindi lang isang tao, ha? At ang minura niya, presidente. First Lady at saka Speaker of the House. Hindi lang mura. Pinagbantaan pa niya, napapatayin niya.
And then there's the issue of the OVP's confidential funds. Gadon says he regrets having been associated with the Dutertes. He has this advice to former ally Sara.
Napaka-immature. Kulang na kulang sa statesmanship. At saka hindi siya nag-aaral. Basta na lang siya nagsasalita. Mag-resign siya. Dahil sinisiguro ko, siguradong sigurado ako na sa next Congress, siya ay i-impeach.
The Department of Justice is leaving it up to the Supreme Court to act on Gadon's complaint, especially since there's another unresolved disbarment case against Duterte. When the VP was still mayor back in 2011, she repeatedly punched a court sheriff in Davao City. Recently, the High Court also received an anonymous letter asking that Duterte be disbarred. That's over her statement to have former dictator Ferdinand Marcos Sr.'s remains exhumed and thrown into the West Philippine Sea. Disbarment cases, according to the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, require thorough investigation. That's even before trial. The IBP has a board of investigators mandated by the Supreme Court to scrutinize these complaints. One basis in a disbarment case is violation of the Code of Professional Responsibility and Accountability.
Sinabi na po ng Korte Suprema na ang pagiging lawyer ay isang privilege, isang pribilehiyo. Hindi karapatan, kundi isang privilege. Isang pribilehiyo lamang. Ibig sabihin ng Korte Suprema dyan, maaari nilang bawiin ang pagiging lawyer ng isang tao. Kung sa tingin nila, ang isang lawyer ay hindi na sumusunod sa code.
For News 5, Camila Samonte, we are One News.
It was very surprising hearing this first thing in the morning that Larry Gadon was the one who filed that disbarment complaint, apart from the anonymous complaint. But there were spectators saying that this is actually a very smart move for Larry Gadon. Ang sabi niya actually, inamin niya kanina, kung hindi nila i-disbar si Sara dahil dito, I will file an impeachment case against all of the justices. Ito ay isang pagsubok para sa kanila. Because if they disbarred him, and they don't do the same thing to the Vice President, then
They
can
will be
argue
unfairness.
Yes.
Yes, diba?
Diba?
Grabe, sobrang daming nangyayari sa araw na ito, no? Na almost impossible siyang bantayan lahat, di ba?
To keep track of everything.
Di ba? Ilang beses.
Kailangan mag-livestream ka, no?
Multiple
screens.
iPad mo, nakabukas yung
VP.
cellphone mo, yung TV mo. So, so right now, no, Quadcom hearing, as we went in, nagpa-present nga si former Senator Sonny Trillanes. Ang nabanggit niya, 1 hour long yung kanyang presentation. So it's a whole narrative, and what he is presenting exactly is, he has this theory, I'm just gonna call it a theory for now, yung theory niya na yung drug war is really to eliminate the competition of former President Duterte's alleged own drug cartel.
Meron siyang tawag dun sa DDS bago na Duterte Drug Syndicate. According to him, yun talaga yun.
Allegedly
But you know, to be honest, I'm quite confused because there have been a lot of matrices that I've been seeing going around. Senator Risa has her own matrix. Meron din kanina lumabas sa hearing. Tapos meron din si Senator Trillanes. Parang nalilito na ako.
Pero ito yung kailangan natin bantayan, no? So nag-wrap na nga kahapon, di ba, yung POGO hearings sa Senate. So, sobrang excited ako makita yung committee report kung ano bang magyayari talaga. Because ang dami nating ininvest na oras doon. Sana naman may kapalit. Ito pa, nag-press con din si Vice President Sara Duterte today sa Zamboanga. Tinanong nga siya, no, may chance pa ba na masave yung friendship niyo ni BBM? Ang sabi niya, parang umabot na raw sila sa point of no return. As we know, and as we reported earlier, no, nag-file na nga ng kaso yung PNP against her. And the Vice President said in that same press con na meron din naman siyang initial plans to file cases against the PNP. Yung mga kaso niya is disobedience also, robbery and kidnapping. Robbery, I think, dun sa may cellphone na issue yun.
Doon yun sa transfer.
Still on top of the subpoena nga, no, that she said she will be answering daw on Friday. Pero conditional ulit. Sabi niya, I will answer the questions of the NBI if they also answer my questions. That's when she faces the NBI nga sa Friday. And it's gonna be a big day. Kasi alam natin na doon din nakaschedule yung next hearing ng
Yun
House.
nga eh.
Kung saan siya pupunta.
Saan siya pupunta, di ba? Kasi magkalayo na yung NBI ngayon sa yung
I think it's quite
Congress.
striking that the PNP and the AFP, they've reduced the security detail of the Vice President down to 25. Remember back in July 30, nasa 433 yan. Minus 75, binawasan na.
Marami na siyang sinabi nung
350 pa. Pero ngayon, 25 na. Vice President Leni Robredo had about 78, 108 nung simula, tapos na-reduce to 78. So sinasabi nila kanina sa Storycon na yung malaking opisina ng Office of the Vice President. So, yung 78 na yun, sinishifting nila yun. Ngayon, 25 na lang. So, just imagine how thin that is.
And considering na, I think Vice President Sara Duterte has way more satellite offices than former Vice President Leni Robredo kasi marami siyang tinayon.
But
diba? So,
ang sabi ng PNP, it's because of a separate police investigation, police probe.
Yun nga kasi, nakasuhan din like yung parts na yung mga members ng VP-SPG like si Colonel Lachica, 'di ba, kasama siya doon sa mga pinapasampina ng PNP. So napakadami nating binabantayan, no. Pero later on tutuloy natin ang talakayan.
Tama yan. We still have a lot to unpack tonight, but up next, more cases could be awaiting Vice President Duterte. This time over her kill threat against President Marcos, his wife, and his cousin. We speak to Justice Undersecretary Jessie Andres next. Don't miss that conversation. Keep it here on One News.
Welcome back. You're still watching a big story here on One News. Vice President Sara Duterte continues to insist that her controversial statement that is contracting somebody to kill the first couple and House Speaker Martin Romualdez if she herself gets killed does not constitute a real or active threat. But despite her explanation, the Justice Department says she's still liable for grave threats and sedition. Recall that according to VP Sara, what she ordered was just a conditional act of revenge. She insists all that she said were taken out of context. In a way, that's true because the VP said that she ordered to kill only after she herself gets killed. But Section 139 of the revised penal code cited forcing or threatening in order to hinder the execution of a law or election or the duties of a public official as a crime. It also included inflicting any act of hate or revenge on a public officer or employee. The punishment is jail term of up to 12 years and a 2 million peso penalty. Meanwhile, Article 142, which is about inciting to sedition, included disturbing the peace of a community and the safety and peace of the government. Article 282, on the other hand, discussed grave threats, which was specifically pertained to as threatening to inflict serious harm, injury, or even death. Up to 12 years in jail also await violators of this law. Recall that in May 2020, the NBI imprisoned, handcuffed, even dragged a teacher in Bataan for threatening then-President Rodrigo Duterte in his social media page. Now, during that same month, a salesman in Butuan City was also arrested for calling Digong baliw or crazy.
Joining us on the big story tonight to discuss this further is Justice Undersecretary Jessie Andres. Yusek Andres, good evening. Maraming salamat po sa inyong oras.
Yes, good evening, Gretchen, Sean, and Pauline. Magandang gabi sa lahat ng inyong televiewers.
Okay. There has been reports going around today that the DOJ is also looking into a possible violation of the anti-terror law by the Vice President, base of course, no, sa mga statements niya from inside Congress late Saturday night. Supposedly, pasok daw to sa Section 4, terrorism, at Section 5 na committing terrorism ng anti-terror law. What can you say about that? Totoo po ba?
Well, the Vice President's statement was very categorical. It was not just a verbal threat. She already commenced certain acts to execute the criminal instruction, which is to engage the services of a hired killer. And in her own statement, she said that she gave specific instructions to kill the President, the First Lady, and Speaker Martin Romualdez, and he should not stop until the three are dead. And when she asked, are you willing to do this? The hired assassin said, yes. And this is no joke, confirmed by the Vice President. So this is not only just a thing that she thought of, it was something that was actually partly executed already, commenced by the engagement of a hired assassin. So that constitutes definitely grave threats because it is inflicting a harm on an individual. It may also constitute sedition because it is an act of revenge and harm to a public official, and no less than the president is the subject of that threat. That's why it is of a higher extent because national security is involved here. You're also correct that the anti-terror law will find also some application in this case because this broad law likewise punishes under Section 4 and Section 5 and Section 6 certain acts committed by the Vice President. What are these? It is also, again, to inflict harm on another person. And this, even the proposal to commit this harm to another person, if it is intended to sow fear, will now fall under the terror law. And why is this applicable? The person that was threatened is actually the President of the Republic of the Philippines. And the one who is making the threat is the second highest official who has, power, influence, and political persuasion. It can really be implemented. That's why it is a serious threat to national security, and it will sow fear. The president has the duty to deliver social services, socio-economic services, so many things, health services to our people. And if he is threatened on his very life by a very powerful individual, then that constitutes a serious threat to national security, and therefore within the tenor of the anti-terror law, because it sows fear and against security of the country. And that is a very serious matter that this administration, the Department of Justice, will look closely into. We will give the Vice President full opportunity to present her side, and we will have our own evidence to gather. But the admission of the Vice President herself is very damning or incriminating because it admits practically all the elements of the crime.
Okay, so Yusek, just a quick clarification to everything that you just said. Is there a chance that all these charges could change after the Vice President shows up and answers to the subpoena that has been sent out by the NBI?
Well, the subpoena issued by the NBI is purposely to give her opportunity to explain her side. We will ask the Vice President, who is this particular individual that she talked to and engaged to do this criminal act against the President, the First Lady, and the Speaker. And it depends on what she will answer and the simultaneous investigation. We have now engaged the intelligence community, the police force, also, and the National Bureau of Investigation to find out the identity of this hired assassin. And after, considering the authenticity of the tape, and the Vice President is also not denying it, we have already preserved the video, the social media video containing the threats, and coupled with our own investigation, I think this will be very strong evidence against the Vice President to face all three charges: grave threats, sedition, and even a violation of the anti-terror law, which I should emphasize was signed during the incumbency of her own father. This is a very broad law where acts are punished even if there is a threat. It is not necessary that you accomplish the threat, but if there is a threat to harm an individual for the purposes of sowing fear amongst the constituents, among the citizenry, then it already constitutes a violation of the anti-terror law.
It is quite ironic that it is being applied to the Vice President. Speaking of hearing from her, Vice President Sara Duterte actually responded to the possible anti-terror case against her. Let's listen in.
Tatawa ako sa violations on the anti-terrorism law kasi sinusubukan nila to reach sa aking properties and assets. Gusto nila mag-cancel ng passport. Gusto nila mag-red notice sa international. So hindi ka makakagalaw overseas. Gusto nila mag-amlak. Anti-money laundering violations. So ibig sabihin nun, i-freeze nila yung pera mo at yung properties mo. Hindi ka makakagastos ng pera at hindi ka makakapasok sa properties mo. At gusto nila mag-issue ng mga search warrants.
Yusek Andres, can we get you to react to what the Vice President said?
Well, the Vice President seems to be far, far ahead of us. She has thought of every possible scenario already. But be that as it may, what is important here is just, the possibility of all of this is actually very not remote. It is the prerogative of the government to make a more extensive investigation, because corruption is also a possible charge based on the findings of the Quadcom on the misuse of funds. So the government has the prerogative under the law really to inquire into the accounts of the vice president. And that will be the basis of other cases. If there is money laundering, if there is unexplained wealth that can be found from the financial investigation coming out of the case for anti-terrorism, then it is equally possible. But you know what we should really point out here would be the due process aspect. Okay, nothing is cast in stone. We have to gather evidence. We have to prove every element of the crime, and we will give the full opportunity to the VP to present evidence. But what is only alarming is that on the part of the vice president, when she made the grave threats, she was not using the law, but she was putting the law into her own hands by engaging the services of a hired killer. We do not expect that from a sitting vice president, the second highest official of the land, to put the law into her own hands and hire a killer instead of going through the judicial process and seeking remedy under the rule of law. And while the government is ready to provide due process, the vice president seems to have a different way of thinking, that she will put the law into her own hands and, try to exact revenge through extrajudicial killings, which is quite deplorable at this point in time.
Yusek, can she argue that this was her statement was made because she was under threat? Na there was a threat against her life, and sabi niya, ngayon, they can't kill me anymore because they will die. Speaking for herself in her defense, in her self-defense, can she argue that? And what would she need to prove that her life was really under threat?
Yeah, we wanted to get to the bottom of that. That's why we will ask her when she goes before the NBI whether this threat was actually recorded and reported to law enforcement authorities. If indeed this was a serious threat, it would be incumbent upon the vice president as a lawyer and as a public official to report this to the law enforcement agents, put it in the blotter, give all the names, the possible individuals or circumstances that might be relevant for the law enforcement agents to do an investigation so that we will be able to protect her. Hopefully she did that. And with respect to, the fit of anger that you were trying to mention, under the revised penal code, whether a threat is actually executed or not, or a condition is put before the threat is being done, such act is still punishable. I'll put it in an example in our Filipino language. Pag sinabi niyo po na kapag ang isang tao ay hindi tumupad sa kanyang pangako or obligasyon, ay papatayin ko siya. A conditional threat po yan. But nonetheless, the law punishes it because it is a crime against public security and liberty. So people should be secure in their persons. They should not have any disturbance of their peace of mind unnecessarily. And a criminal threat, a threat to execute an act which is criminal in nature, which is murder, is something that disturbs public security and safety. So that is the rationale why even a threat is being punished. Kayo po, siguro you would understand a situation where an individual will threaten to, kill your family members, whatever it may be, for whatever reason, because of your advocacies, because of your belief. And that is something that is, protected by the law. That's why even making a threat, even if you have not completely done it, it's already punishable. But as in this case, you notice she already admitted that there was an individual who was engaged. That's why this is very alarming, and the government has to do its duty to protect an elected official. The president of the country is the highest official of the land. He was voted into that position because people expect so much from him, and he has to deliver. and threats to his life will impede the performance of his duties.
Okay,
That's why we have to do something about this.
yes. Yusek, speaking of that individual, I'm curious about the definition of terms kasi as far as the Vice President is concerned, she did argue that she never used the words assassin, hitman, or killer. I mean, legally, Yusek, ano ba yung rule of law there? Can we deduce or just assume na assassin nga yun?
The word assassin is just a description of a person who is hired to kill. But what is established from the words of the Vice President is that she already engaged the services, whether we pay that person or not. He engaged the services of a person, gave specific instructions to kill specific named individuals. That is why it is no joke. It was even confirmed by the person engaged that he will be able to do it, and he will do it. That's why it doesn't matter whether we use the term assassin, but there is a person. The element of the crime is not the word assassin. The element of the crime is the disturbance of the peace when you threaten somebody of harm or even death. So that is what is being punished.
Right. But when we
Irrelevant po yung term na assassin.
When we talk about that person, no, that quote-unquote
Yes.
assassin, right, anong pong klaseng ebidensya with regard to yung talagang nag-exist ba ito? Like, what kind of evidence are you looking for? Obviously, a name, right?
Yeah.
But what are the chances really that we can get this information? And if the Vice President refuses to give up the name, what are the consequences then?
Yeah, two things. First and foremost, the admission of an individual can be used as evidence against that individual. So primarily, the evidence coming from the Vice President herself is admissible in court as evidence to prove the grave threats. If the video is authenticated and the Vice President says that, yes, I made those statements, there is nothing else that you need to prove. Because that is an admission against interest, that is a self-confessed testimony that is admissible in court. Hindi po namin siya hinihinga ng pahayag, ngunit siya po ay voluntaryong nagpahayag ng kanyang masamang balakin. Whether it's conditional or not, it is still punishable. That is why on our part, we will have our own effort. Marami pong paraan, forensic investigation, I should refer to it. There are many ways by which we can determine ultimately who is this person referred to by the Vice President. I am sure it exists. In evidence, there is such a thing as res ipsa loquitur. Res ipsa loquitur, the thing speaks for itself. You listen to the video, the way the Vice President said it. In your own assessment, do you think she was telling a lie? Or was she candidly explaining what she actually did?
That's the thing,
Answering
though.
a particular question. I do not think that you would say that she's lying. And it looks very spontaneous.
To make it clear,
Unless you see
Yusek,
it otherwise. We will respect that.
medyo nagkasakit nga po ako dahil pinanood ko po siya live kasi naabutan ko po.
I cannot believe it.
Okay,
Dahil po, yung act of revenge po, hindi ho dapat manggagaling yan sa public officials. We have to follow the rule of law. Kung sino ho ang pamatay sa isang tao, paano ho natin pagbibintangan? Kaagad-agad ang isang tao at gaganti na tayo, papatayin din natin. Marami pong maaring mangyari.
So do you mean to say, Yusek?
One individual, especially one involved in politics, could have many enemies. Hindi ho pwedeng ituturo kaagad natin na walang due process. Pagbigyan ho natin yung paraan ng batas to determine the truth.
So am I getting it right, Yusek, na hindi kailangan na ipresenta itong supposed hitman or kung sino man yon?
No.
No need.
That's
what you're saying.
The element of the crime is the threat itself to inflict harm on an individual. And what makes it aggravating is that the person subject of the harm and the threat is the highest ranking official of the land, ang ating pong sariling Pangulo. That's why it poses a national security concern. That is why the anti-terror law is also being invoked now, because it tends to sow fear Now, everybody, the DDS is, I don't think it is a legend. If you understand what I mean by DDS, Davao Death Squad, it's supposed to be a legend, but I don't think it is a legend.
Yusek,
So many people have testified about the reality of the existence of a Davao Death Squad. Can you imagine that coupled with the threat coming from the Vice President? And she is the beneficiary of the death of the President. So it can be very plausible that someone who wants to ascend into power would do some things, maybe not legal, but attempted to do something because she is the constitutional successor. When the president dies or is incapacitated, so you have to take things in the proper context. At the way she said it, I believed it. If my ordinary perception is wrong, I'm sorry. But the way she said it, it doesn't seem like to be part of a script. It was a spontaneous, expression of the truth based on what she knows.
Yusek, if the courts are able to determine probable cause, can the Vice President be arrested? We were referring to two cases back during the Duterte administration's time. Doon sa mga kaso na yun, parang kinaladkad pa yung mga nag-express na ito yung maaaring mangyari sa presidente, magbibigay sila ng reward kapag pinatay, tinawag na baliw si Digong, ito nakaladkad sila. In the case of the Vice President, the NBI said nagkamali sila noon dahil di nabigyan ng due process. This time, they're giving due process. But ultimately, where can this lead? And is it bailable? The grave threats and sedition, is that bailable?
Yeah, kasi dagdag ko lang, no, Yusek and Gretch, kasi may sinasabi rin na yung NBI, no, si Director Santiago sa amin the other night on this show, that hindi na raw sapat ngayon, hindi na raw sila gumagamit ng probable cause lang kasi ang ending nun ay kadalasan ay nadi-dismiss ang kaso. So, ngayon may parang mas evidentiary na.
Allow me to explain that.
Yes.
As part of the Department of Justice reforms, our leadership, including myself, we changed the rules. Previously, it was just probable cause and someone can be sued in court and face trial. Probable cause is such a little amount of evidence that you will submit to the prosecutors and they will file a criminal case. But poor people are disadvantaged in this manner and they have to keep on facing cases and they are probably incarcerated because they cannot post bail. That's why we changed it. To level the playing field, we have to increase the level of evidence. It is now prima facie evidence with reasonable certainty of conviction for the crime charge. So ang ibig sabihin po niyan, kumpleto ang ebidensya namin, lahat ng elemento ng krimen. Dapat hawak na namin bago kami mag-file ng case. It's a solid and strong case that will stand the rigors of trial before we file it. Now, the question of whether the Vice President can be arrested, first, you have to understand the Vice President is not immune from suit. Under the Constitution, only the President of the Republic is immune from suit and only during his term. So the Vice President can face criminal cases as in fact, si former Vice President Leni Robredo was subjected to a similar case inciting to sedition. And there was a ruling on that matter and there was no issue on the jurisdiction of the Department of Justice to take cognizance of the case. But we dismissed it. The Department of Justice dismissed it for insufficiency of evidence eventually. But that just goes to show sitting officials, including the Vice President, senators like Senator De Lima, Senator Trillanes, were charged criminally and had to be incarcerated, had to face the consequences of their acts because some offenses are non-bailable. Yung grave threats po is a bailable offense. Yung sedition is also a bailable offense. Yung anti-terror law is a non-bailable offense.
Okay, pag
So it is possible that
pag may violation po ng Anti-Terror Act, maaari po bang maklasify si VP Sara as a terrorist if she is found convicted of violating that law?
No. There's a difference. There's a big difference. There is such a procedure as designation of a terrorist. We are not doing that. that there is also that procedure of first designating the individual as a terrorist and then we can act. Yung pong mga sinasabi kanina ni Vice President Sara ay yun po yung designated terrorist.
So dapat
Na
maklasify po
kapag
muna
ikaw
siya.
po ay
Oo.
designated ka na terrorist, yun pong accounts mo ma-freeze, pwede po kayong yung mga assets mo ma-freeze, part 2 yun ng remedies ng gobyerno. Pero hindi po namin iniisip yun. That's why I immediately reacted. She is so far ahead of us. We are just, trying to investigate this particular threat and also the corruption charges possibly coming from the investigation being done by Congress. And we are not thinking of those other things that she mentioned to freeze her assets. No.
But
So,
Yusek,
if the evidence warrants, then we will go into it, but not right now.
Yusek, you would need to be classified as a terrorist first before you can violate the
No.
anti-terror law.
No.
Ah, okay.
No. That's why I said even a proposal to commit terrorist acts is also punishable.
Okay.
If you inflict harm, if you propose to inflict harm on an individual for the purpose of sowing fear in the citizenry, it has political implications, tension, public security issues, then it is already punishable. It's a very strict law. Section 4, Section 5, Section 6 of the anti-terror law is broad enough to cover this. That's why I am saying it is ironic that this was passed during the incumbency of her father, when the father wanted to go after all of these people. And that's why the Congress approved this in this version,
Okay.
which is
Yusek?
very lenient, very strict against the offender.
Okay,
And
so
now it's coming back.
all right. Yes,
in
the
a different way.
Yusek, is definitely not lost on everybody here. Let me assure you of that. But just to wrap everything that you said, out of the
Yeah.
three charges, grave threat, sedition, possible, and violations of the anti-terror law, the only one that is not bailable and therefore possible na ma-detain while waiting for trial, si Vice President Sara Duterte, in case, of course, is the violation to the anti-terror law. Dahil bailable yung
That is
dalawa.
correct.
Okay.
That is correct. And if ever, let me just expound a little on that. Even if it is a non-bailable offense, you can apply with the court on a petition for bail to allow you provisional freedom during the pendency of the trial. And that is also a remedy. Everything is provided in the law. That's why I was always arguing in this manner. Do not put the law into your own hands. There are remedies available in the law to protect our rights, and our courts are effective, functioning, and independent. The Supreme Court is an excellent Supreme Court. Most of them are scholars and renowned lawyers, and they will definitely do their duty in accordance with their oath as justices of the Supreme Court. There are so many remedies, and in a democracy, debate is encouraged. A vibrant debate is a manifestation of a vibrant democracy. But let us not go out of the legal framework and the constitutional framework in asserting our reliefs and remedies.
Yan din po, Yusek, yung sinabi ninyo, sa mga tanong ng media about yung mga statements naman ni former President Digong Duterte when he was saying about fractured government. But either way, we have run out of time. Thank you so much for indulging us tonight, Justice Undersecretary Jessie Andres. Maraming salamat po.
We're going to pause for a quick break, but up next, the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency names personalities connected to the billion-peso drug haul in Mexico, Pampanga. Now, who's in it? Find out when the big story returns. Keep it here, only on One News.
Welcome back. You're still watching the big story here on One News. In today's House Quad Committee hearing, the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency named personalities connected to the billion-peso drug haul in Mexico, Pampanga last year. Now, among them was Senator Bongo. Here is Marian Enriquez with the details.
The Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency released a matrix during the 12th hearing of the House Quad Committee. It showed the personalities allegedly behind the 3.6 billion pesos worth of illegal drugs confiscated in a warehouse in Mexico, Pampanga. The warehouse was owned by Empire 999 of Willie Ong and ADT Yang. They're both linked to alleged Chinese drug lord Alan Lim, also known as Lin Wei-shong. Lim is said to be connected to Senator Bongo, which everybody knows was former President Rodrigo Duterte's special assistant.
Alan Lin is a close friend of then Special Assistant to the President, Christopher Bongo. Alan Lin is a casino junket operator who is involved in the kidnapping of high-roller Chinese gamblers.
Sinabi nyo kanina, si Alan Lin ay involved sa illegal drugs. So, ang ibig bang sabihin, involved din si Senator Bongo sa drugs since kinonect niyo po siya?
They are just close friends. It is not specific that they are involved in drugs.
Close friends. So, alam po ni Bongo ang mga trabaho po ni Alan Lin.
That could be answered by Senator Bongo, ma'am, not us yet.
At this point, Congresswoman Franz Castro issued a stern warning to PIDEA.
So, sorry po, Asek Gumban. Wag po kayong gagawa ng ganyang matrix na incriminating at kinokonek-connect nyo tapos ang title nyo ay illegal and POGO drugs connection.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, maybe the title is wrong.
Senator Bongo meanwhile denied the allegations.
Irresponsible naman po ng PIDEA sa kanilang ihahayag sa mga hearings. Hindi po kami close friends ni Alan Lim at mas lalong hindi po ako involved sa illegal drugs.
Former Senator Antonio Trillanes also attended the said hearing. He said he also has matrix of his own.
Papakita ko yung koneksyon ni Duterte sa illegal na droga, no? Papakilala ko yung buong sindikato ng Duterte Drug Syndicate.
Trillanes also thinks the former president should be held accountable for allegedly inciting the military to sedition.
Kailangan siguraduhin na na walang makukuha ng mga officers itong mga Duterte, no? Kasi malaking problema 'yan. Kaya kailangan continuous monitoring. Pero ako naman, based dun sa monitoring din namin, hindi naman marami, kundi merong may simpatya kay Duterte.
In addition to that, Trillanes also plans to file an impeachment complaint against Vice President Sara Duterte.
Kailangan matanggal ito sa pwesto. Nakita nyo ba? Sabi ko may topak eh.
To accusations that he's just an attack dog of the administration, Trillanes had this to say.
Alam nyo, si Digong, kung pangahawakan mo yung sasabihin niya, talagang dadaling ka niyan sa impyerno or talagang cult follower ka to actually believe him.
For News 5, I'm Marian Enriquez. We are One News.
And true enough, nakasalang pa nga si former Senator Sonny Trillanes sa Quadcom. Unfortunately, naubusan na tayo ng oras. That's it for the big story tonight. Last reminder, 28 nights to go before Christmas.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
We'll definitely be updating you on the Quadcom hearings tomorrow. So wait out and watch out for that. In the meantime, stay tuned because coming up next is Play-by-Play with Andre Felix and Cheska Litton-Calao from the big story to Play-by-Play.
Hi, guys!
Good evening.
How is it that every time we're here, napapressure lang ako lalo with the countdown?
Ako rin.
Sa Christmas?
Alam ko kung bakit. Wala pa sa ating nakakasimula sa shopping.
Oy, si Cheska actually.
Ito, si Cheska.
Advance yan. Meron yan.
Oh, laging maaga eh. Maaga rin regalo.
Ano pa rin mong i-gift kay Gretchen?
Alam mo na. I thought we agreed na walang gift.
Speaking of pressure, I'm not feeling it right now.
Ako may naisip ako, pero mamaya na lang.
Tao na lang.
Thank you, Gretch. Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Boss Pawi. We've got updates from the Emirates Cup in the NBA and the start of the PBA Commissioner's Cup.
And results of a do-or-die battle for the last Final Four spot in UAAP men's basketball.
I'm back. I'm Andre Felix.
And I'm Cheska Latoncalao.
And here's tonight's play-by-play.
Puts it on. Unbelievable. On the left side. Oh, the pass! Stuck in another one. Bakuna's rejecting